This video replaces an earlier one which was rendered obsolete by the extensive changes made to the GEDCOM import wizard in the course of the last year. In this video, I will import the same GEDCOM file into rootsTrust 2 times, once as a simple import without options and ignoring any document or multimedia files described in the GEDCOM file, and again with some custom options and including document and multimedia files. I created the GEDCOM file in question on Mac OS from the rootsTrust Abraham Lincoln database, and I will import it into Windows. That database contains links to both document and multimedia files. Let's start off with the simple import. First, from the main menu bar, I select Database, Import GEDCOM File. That causes this dialog box to be displayed. Next, I select the input file by clicking on the Browse button. The file I want to import is located on my desktop. rootsTrust has pre-filled the database name field by using the file name of the input file minus the .ged file name extension. I already have a database by the name of Abraham Lincoln, so I have to change the name to make it unique. Otherwise, the wizard will complain and prevent me from continuing. I choose Abraham Lincoln 2. How's that for a clever name? My database directory is located on my iCloud drive. So the new database will be created there by default. I could change that location to anything I wanted before continuing, if I didn't want the new database to be located there. Now I deselect the option to import linked document and multimedia files. I am doing this only to demonstrate how easy a simple GEDCOM import can be. Why would one otherwise choose to not import linked files? Well, suppose you have acquired a GEDCOM file that references files, but you do not have access to those files. You still want to import the data to investigate the familial relationships it contains. So you suppress importing the linked files to avoid problems. Now I click on the Next button, which takes me to a decision panel where I have the opportunity to proceed directly to the import process or to do a customized import. I will go with the default and start importing right away. So the import process didn't take long and produces an import log file that contains a list of the options specified, enumerates the objects that were created, and identifies any custom event types that were defined in the GEDCOM file. Most of the options enumerated you have not seen before. That's because they are default values. You would have seen them had I chosen the customized import. The log file also can list any adoptions encountered in the file. The reason for this is that the GEDCOM files produced by some genealogy programs do not always properly distinguish between natural and adoptive parents. Listing adopted persons allows you to verify whether the natural and adoptive child-parent relationships were properly created by the import process. If the child-parent relationships were not properly described in the GEDCOM file, you will have to rebuild them manually. This particular file that I just imported contains no adoptions. Now let's move on to the customized import. I repeat the first few steps I performed in the previous import. This time I will create database Abraham Lincoln 3. And this time I will import linked document and multimedia files. In order to import a GEDCOM file into rootsTrust and successfully link to the external files identified in it, those files must be located on the target computer and have the same folder structure, folder names, and file names as on the source computer. Prior to starting the import process, rootsTrust will read the entire GEDCOM file to locate all the file paths it contains and present you with one or more sets of file cabinet candidates to select from. A file cabinet candidate is simply a cluster of files that has a common root directory or folder. The GEDCOM file I am importing today has two such clusters, as you will see. One for document images and another for photographic images. They are located on my Mac Mini and have been copied to my Windows computer, where they will become the file cabinets of the new database that will be created. You might ask, why do I have to mess with file cabinets? Why can't rootsTrust just import the files as they are described, the way other genealogy programs do? The answer is flexibility. Here are two forms of flexibility provided by file cabinets. One, the file paths described in a GEDCOM file might not correspond exactly to the paths of the corresponding files on the target system. For example, a GEDCOM file describes files in a Windows directory x/exhibits, but you have a Mac, or your Windows computer does not have an X drive. Two, most other genealogy programs store the absolute paths of linked files in their database. So if you move these files, you break the linkages and lose access to the files. With rootsTrust, if you move a file cabinet, you only temporarily lose access to all its files. By simply updating the path of that file cabinet in the Preferences form, you regain access to all the files in that file cabinet. I will demonstrate this later. While I was talking, the wizard scanned the GEDCOM file and figured out how the linked files are clustered. The next button was enabled following completion of the scanning. Since this GEDCOM file is so small, the button was enabled almost immediately. For a larger GEDCOM file, there will be a noticeable wait, giving you time to read the instructions. Now I click the next button to view the file cabinet candidates. The table is not wide enough to show all the paths in their full length, so I resize the form horizontally. Keep in mind that we are now looking at Mac OS file paths. We'll change them later. We are interested in selecting the best set of candidates that separate documents from photos, since that's the way the file cabinets were set up originally on the source computer. What we see now goes down to the surname level. It would be perfectly acceptable to make surname file cabinets, but in my estimation, that would be overkill. The calibration values on the slider control here represent the number of slashes in the paths. By moving the slider one notch to the left, I get the desired set of two file cabinets, one for documents and one for photos. If I were to move the slider to 7, I would wind up with one file cabinet which would have to be declared as combined, that is, containing a mixture of documents and photos. That would work too, but I will stick with 8 because the document files are physically separated from the photos in these file cabinets. After clicking Next, I am given the opportunity to edit the names and types of my selected file cabinets. I changed the type of the first one to document, and rootsTrust has already changed the name for me. And the second one I changed to multimedia, but I want to name that photos. Okay, now that I have taken care of the file cabinets, I arrive at the decision panel, and this time I select the customized import. And flash, the form suddenly widens to make room for a set of left panel buttons that provide direct access to the individual customization panels. There are two ways, here are the buttons, the left panel buttons. There are two ways to visit these panels, via the next and back buttons. This is recommended for the first-time user who is unfamiliar with the various custom options and what they can do. You can look at each panel, see what features it provides, and decide if you want to avail yourself of those features. Or you can use the left panel buttons. This is ideal for the experienced user who knows exactly what he or she wants. You only visit the panels that are of interest to you for this particular GEDCOM import. Earlier versions of rootsTrust didn't have nearly as many import options. What happened? Well, members of the user community asked for additional options to allow them to convert makeshift features of their old genealogy programs to rootsTrust features. For example, the GEDCOM specification allows for each event to have an age field to document the age of the primary person at the time of the event. Spousal events have an age field for each spouse. Many genealogy programs do not expose the age field, forcing users to store that information in the description field if the program in question has a description field. rootsTrust can optionally extract the age information from the GEDCOM event definitions and store it in rootsTrust's age field. I'm not going to discuss each of the option panels. That would take too long. I have already introduced you to Age at Event option, and for this import I will select Find a Grave and the Place Preprocessor. FindAGrave.com is a popular website, and many genealogists link persons in their database to find a grave via the memorial number. This is done in most genealogy programs by defining a custom event to house the memorial number. rootsTrust has a Find a Grave memorial number field that is visible on death, burial, and cremation events. If the field contains a valid memorial number, you can open your web browser to the corresponding memorial page by simply clicking the Visit Memorial button. I will demonstrate this later. The GEDCOM file that I am importing contains custom Find a Grave events that rootsTrust will convert for me so that my event summary display does not contain the unsightly Find a Grave items, which are really not events. A number of genealogy programs allow their users to overload the place field of an event. By overloading, I mean including non-place information. Place description information in the GEDCOM specification is restricted to levels of jurisdictional hierarchy, like city, county, state, and country. Other items like latitude, longitude, temple, postal code, address detail, which could be a street address or the name of a church, etc., should not really be included. Some people even store notes or source citations in the place field. These practices are incompatible with rootsTrust and the GEDCOM specification. rootsTrust's GEDCOM import wizard does a fairly good job of sorting through these overloaded place descriptions, separating the non-place data from the actual place data and storing each item in its rightful location. It also does this in multiple languages. However, it is not perfect. The place preprocessor loads all the place descriptors from your GEDCOM file and displays them in a table that you can sort and edit. This allows you to easily make changes that would be difficult or even impossible to make after the import process is complete. Let's start with Find a Grave. My GEDCOM file is open on my desktop, and a Find a Grave memorial number event is highlighted. The value 627 is the so-called descriptor field. It is old Abe's memorial number. The text following to type is the custom event name. I will copy this value and paste it into the custom event tag field of the wizard. Then I select the top radio button to let the wizard know that the memorial number is located in the descriptor field. That's all it takes. Now let's move on to the place preprocessor. First, click the place preprocessor left panel button. If you want to actually execute the preprocessor, you have to select the checkbox at the bottom of the panel and then click the next button. The place preprocessor form now becomes populated with all the place descriptions found in the GEDCOM file. Since this GEDCOM file is relatively small, the form populates quickly. If I were importing a larger file, a message would appear warning me not to do any editing until the form is fully populated. As it turns out, the place descriptions in this GEDCOM file are in pretty good shape and need no editing. But let's take a look at some of the things I could do in the place preprocessor. First, I can sort by column. This is great for checking for spelling errors or misassignments, that is, values that were assigned to the wrong column. For instance, when the name of a county shows up in the township column or in the state column. Or we can swap adjacent blocks of data in blocks of data in adjacent columns. And if I swap them again, I return them to their original state. We can also shift blocks of data to the left and to the right. Notice that I can't shift any further to the left. That's because the next column is not completely empty. The corresponding block in the adjacent left column is not empty. So it will not allow that to occur. I can merge adjacent blocks of data, merge to the right. What I've done is I've combined the data from the two blocks and separated them with commas. I can split, which is the opposite of merging, split to the left to return those two blocks of data to their original state. Okay, what else can I do? I can force a contiguous block of values to uppercase or to, please bear with me, the program that I use to make this video competes with the mouse, and then sometimes it's difficult to get control of pop-up menus for that reason. I can also convert to title case meaning the first letter of each word is capitalized and the rest of the letters are in lowercase. And the last thing that we can do is propagate a value to all members of a column beneath it. Oh. Propagate top cell downward. And we can also use that to clear. We're simply propagating an empty cell downward. So, now that I'm finished with the place preprocessor, I can close the form by clicking the OK button. A new GEDCOM file will be created that contains the updated place descriptions. The new GEDCOM file, rather than the original file, will be imported. By clicking the OK button on the wizard, I start the actual import process that creates the new database. Oops. rootsTrust can't find Abe's mugshot. That's because the file cabinet paths still point to locations on my Mac Mini. I'll fix that by editing the file cabinet paths to point to my iCloud drive. So I click on the Preferences icon to open the Preferences dialog box. Then I click on the File Cabinet tab to display the File Cabinet panel. Now I select the iCloud drive and remove that portion of the path which refers to the Mac. That's anything to the left of file cabinets. And I do the same thing for the photo file cabinet. iCloud drive, and strip off the Mac portion of the path. Close the dialog and click the root button to redisplay Abe. As you can see, we have connected to at least the photo file cabinet. If I click on Documents, and there is a document, you can only see part of it. That's a census page. So we have also connected to the Documents file cabinet. I am essentially finished, but I promised earlier that I would show you two things. First, let's display Abe's death event. Notice that the Find a Grave memorial number is populated. When I click on the Visit Memorial button, his memorial opens up in my browser. Next, while rootsTrust is still running, I'm going to move the file cabinets from my iCloud drive to my Google Drive. Cut. Google Drive. Paste. There they are, file cabinets Lincoln on the Google Drive. We go back to the iCloud Drive and they're not there. Now let's click the root button and you see that it can't find the mugshot, Abe's mugshot, because we have moved the file cabinets. So what am I going to do now? I'll simply go into the Preferences form, and change the location of the file cabinets to the Google Drive. Close the dialog box. Click the Root button again, and there we are. So I moved the file cabinets from one location to another while the program was still in execution and was able to recover from that. Try that with another genealogy program. This concludes the GEDCOM import video. If you haven't already done so, please check out our other rootsTrust videos on YouTube or via the demo videos item on rootsTrust's main menu.